In this video, we're going to do a really quick introduction to Excel and then in particular talk about how we can do some calculations in Excel, namely the center, the mean, median, and mode, and standard deviation for a data set. So we're going to in particular take a look at question number 2 on this slide. So first order of business is over here. I've got a blank Excel workbook which is open. Here I should say that I'm using a Mac. It should look fairly identical on a PC, maybe slightly different, but anything that I describe or anything that I enter would be exactly the same if you're working with Excel on a PC. So in Excel, it's a spreadsheet. We have a bunch of boxes where we can enter text, values, or formulas. So each of these boxes is called a cell, and the cell location is indicated by the column that it's in, and the columns are labeled with letters, A up to however many columns you want to have, and what row it's in, where the rows are indicated by numbers. So this cell over here is in column D, row 3, so we would say that this is cell D3. This is cell C2, and so on. So to move around from cells, we can click on them. You could use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move around as well. So let's start up in cell A1, and over here we're going to enter the lengths. And in question 2, these are in centimeters. So I write lengths in centimeters. And I hit return, and that drops me down to the next cell. So whatever I type in here in this cell, I hit return. Now I see that text in cell A1. And coming down column A, I'm going to enter each of these 10 values that I see in the sample of lengths. So I have 5.3. I enter 5.3. I hit return. Now the value 5.3 is in cell A2. And 6.3, 6.4, 6.6, 6.7, 6.9, 7.1, 7.1, 7.2. Okay. So here I've made a mistake on purpose. I missed one of the values in my data set. So what I should have is 3 lizards that have a length of 7.1 centimeters. I only wrote 2 of them, entered 2 of them. So to correct that, let's say over here I made a mistake. I meant to enter 7.1. I can just click on cell A10, type 7.1, hit enter, and that replaces the 7.2 with a 7.1. And now in cell A11, I can type that last value, which was 7.2. So now I have all 10 values in my sample entered down column A. So in column C, we're going to enter some labels for the mean. So we're going to do some calculations. The mean, median, and now I'm just entering text. Mode. So in each of these cells, I'm typing the text, hitting enter. That bumps me down to the next row. And the last one will be standard deviation. And I'm going to do those calculations over here. And so coming to the slides, I'm going to back up where we can see a list of all of these functions. So Excel has tons and tons of functions. These are just a couple that we're going to look at here. So what's important is when we're doing calculations in Excel, we're entering formulas for Excel to calculate. We always begin the entry into the cell where we want to do the calculation with an equal sign. So this tells Excel right now, don't literally type what I'm going to enter into this cell. I'm going to tell you some calculations to do, and what I want to see in this cell after I hit enter is the output of those calculations. So Excel has some built-in functions. A lot of them, a lot of the statistics functions that we need are going to be built in. So the function for mean is called average. So I start with an equal sign, I type the word average. It doesn't matter whether it's uppercase or lowercase, but I've done it in uppercase. Now I type a left parenthesis to begin entering the numbers into Excel that I would like to average. So I can either type in numbers, or usually you have those numbers entered into cells already. So in this case, I've got all of the lengths in cells A2 all the way down to cell A11. So I'm going to type A2. That means the first value is located in cell A2. And I want to include all of the values down to cell A11. So I put a colon, so I could enter each of these cells individually. Putting a colon says take everything from A2, all of the cells that go from A2 all the way down to A11. And we can see those cells are highlighted in blue, so I can make sure that I've got the right cell range entered into my formula. It's important that I close off this function with a right parenthesis. And what this is telling Excel to do, the equal sign says do a calculation. I want you to calculate the average of all of the values located in cell A2 down to A11. And when I hit enter, out comes the calculation of 6.67 centimeters. This is the average, the mean of our sample. What I don't see is what I just typed. And if I want to double check what I actually wrote as my formula, I can double click on the cell D2 where I had the formula, and I can see what I entered. If I wanted to make any changes, I could do that here. Once it looks good, I hit return and the output appears in D2. We can see the function for median on the slide over here is called median. So I'm going to enter equals median. I need to begin with an equal sign. I put a left parenthesis, and then I enter the cells that I want to calculate the median of. In the first example, we entered A2 colon A11. Another possibility is after I have the parenthesis here, I can move the pointer around in Excel, stop when I'm over cell A2, click, hold the click down, and drag down to all of the cells where the values are, and stop at A11. And now I've got Excel is going to calculate the median of the values in A2 down to A11, and that tells me it's 6.8. So we can see here the median is a little bit bigger than the mean, and that's because we have this outlier on the left, which is pulling the mean a little bit below the median. The mode, we don't really need Excel to calculate this, but if we had a larger data set where the values weren't necessarily sorted, this would be helpful. So the mode function is called mode, and we would enter cells A2 to A11, and out comes 7.1, and we can see that that makes sense. 7.1 is the most frequent value in our data set. For the standard deviation, we need to be careful because depending on whether our data is from a sample or a population, the calculation for standard deviation is a little bit different. So to take this into account, Excel has each of these functions, standard deviation for a sample and standard deviation for a population. So in this case, since we've got just a sample of 10 lizards, we want to calculate the standard deviation for a sample. So it's a formula, so I start with equals, and here the formula for standard deviation is equals STDEV, and we can see a little pop-up window occurs with different standard deviation functions. So again, these are not all the same. Since our data is for a sample, we want to pick the one that has a .s at the end. And then I put my left parenthesis, highlight the cells where the values are, right parenthesis, and hit return. And now I can see that the standard deviation is 0.755. So that concludes the basics of entering formulas for data sets. If you have a really large data set in Excel, sometimes, or a lot of values, you could copy and paste, and depending on where you're copying from, it might nicely paste the values into Excel. But since we only had 10 values in this data set, it wasn't too difficult to enter them all in. I'll do a separate video right now that'll be really brief to talk about example 3 and how we could do that nicely. And if you use Google Sheets, I'll make a separate video. It's very similar in Google Sheets to show how we do the same operations in Google Sheets.